Now you probably heard of the revision tool cue cards, but what you didn't realise maybe is that you are using it completely wrongly. This is an example of a cue card that I saw with my students really regularly, and they might have a massive box of these things categorized into different areas, got it from W.H. Smith, and just put all of the notes from their textbook onto the page, and they're copying it word for word. Now they're not really learning a huge amount by doing this. What you want a cue card to be is what it says in the name. You want it to be an actual cue or a prompt for your brain to do the work of remembering the information. Because again, you're not going to have these cue cards in the exam with you. You want it in here, not on here. So let me show you some examples of good cue cards. Really specific parts of revision, and this is really vocabulary for French and Spanish and other modern foreign languages. Names that you might find hard to remember, so for instance some scientific names that are tricky, or historical names of people, and equations that you need to remember, so for instance maybe in physics or mathematics, and general lists of any kind that you're struggling to remember. So let me show you some examples of good cue cards and what they should actually look like. Now, similar to what I said in the previous video about mind maps, you essentially want cue cards to be as visual as possible, because visual is what gets stuck in your head. A picture says 1,000 words, and as much color and as much vitality that you can give to that picture, the better. In general, what you want to do with a cue card is get whatever word that you're trying to remember and add a weird or absurd or abstract picture to it, a drawing, and add as much color and vitality as you can, because your brain is going to remember an image much easier than it's going to remember any letters or words, especially when it comes to that exam stress. So let me give you some examples of that now. If I'm using it for language vocabulary, I'm trying to remember the word for French here, and what I've given myself is a picture of a girl. She's called Fran, and she is saying something. To me, that says Fran says. Fran says, français. In science, if I'm struggling to remember scientific words, I'm trying to remember the word for cell replication that makes gametes. So here I've got mayonnaise, I've got a girl who's clearly a sister because I've labelled her as such, mayo-cis, dropped it there. If I'm trying to remember key names in history, and I can do this with dates as well, and battles, whatever, key events, I'm trying to remember, in this case, the World War II British Prime Minister. And I've got a hill, and I've got a church. Churchill, Winston Churchill. Now, you don't necessarily always need to use pictures, although I thoroughly advise it. But for instance, with physics equations that you need to remember, here's a way that I do it. I draw up every single equation that you need to know, and then I put the abbreviation on the front. P equals E over T. And then I try and remember it every time when I recap it. And then on the back, I've got what the actual answer is with all the units and all the names of each. So now you know how to make an individual cue card, but the next stage is even more important, and that is categorizing those cue cards once you've made them. So let's say for French vocabulary, you have 100 words that you're trying to remember. What you want to do is categorize them into different sections, similar to what I've done just here. And now you've got them on different categories, you can say to yourself, on this time, on this day, I'm going to be looking at nouns or verbs or hobbies or whatever categories you decide to use. You can do exactly the same thing with history, so you can put key dates, key battles, key names of certain parts of history that you've been studying, and it's a really good way of testing yourself. Now, two other things that I'd recommend when it comes to cue cards. Firstly, I try to systemize and track as much as possible when you're recapping those cue cards. And if you want any advice on that, go back to my previous video on revision trackers. There'll be a link somewhere or at the end of the video. But once you've got a massive pool of cue cards, you can start having fun with it. You can start testing with your mates and making it a game. I know revision by itself is fun enough already, but you might as well gamify it if you can. When I was a science teacher, this game was always a fan favourite in year 10s, and we'd go around the whole class and everybody would test each other. It was a lot of fun. So I hope that has cleared up some myths around cue cards so that you can make your own a bit more effectively. As ever, if you've got any questions or comments or whatever, please do comment below and I will answer everything that comes through. Until next time, see you later.